It's been over a year, and finally, Curseborne has gone from being a Kickstarter to now being released to the public. Curseborne is a new urban horror / urban fantasy tabletop role-playing game created by Onxy Path Publishing, who you may know for their work on Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition, Chronicles of Darkness, World of Darkness, Exalted, as well as the games that they own, which are Scion, Trinity Continuum, which I have a shirt of right now, and they came from. Now, this game, Curseborne, is not owned by White Wolf or Paradox, who own Vampire the Masquerade and Chronicles of Darkness. So this is their own thing, and if they wish to create more Curseborne product, they don't have to go through a third party for approval, which I wholeheartedly approve. Even though I'm a third party, I'm not part of their approval process at all. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, so it uses the Storypath Ultra system, which for me is an improvement over the Storypath system that was used for Scion and Trinity Continuum, which I have always thought in my mind is a spiritual successor and better version of the storyteller and storytelling systems that White Wolf has used in the past. In Curseborne, you're going to play as supernatural creatures, and they've gotten their powers through powerful curses that have turned them into supernaturals. That's sort of the general overview. I'll go into more detail later on. And then for the base setting, it is modern day, but you can play in the past if you wish. One of the things that they include in this book are epochs. It is lightly mentioned, but epochs are essentially splintered timelines of different eras. So I've run Curseborne myself for over a year. I think I've probably run it longer than anyone who is not a developer on Curseborne. I've run many actual plays, and I've run it for various different groups. So I think I have an authority to say that I really enjoy the system, and if that's all you need to check it out, I highly recommend purchasing the Curseborne Ash Can. That is sort of like a preview of the system and the setting. There have been some improvements since that was initially released, but sometimes you can get it for free. I think usually it's around $5 US dollar amount. I've been trying to settle on a elevator pitch for people who are trying to get their players into Curseborne. My personal opinion is Curseborne is an urban horror or urban fantasy game that focuses on social investigation and combat encounters, typically leaning into family drama and family dynamics with a supernatural twist. Conflict between the families involves maintaining control of supernatural locations called Liminalities and supernatural objects called heirlooms and relics. These help families assert dominance over each other as well as form alliances. Now, as you get more comfortable with the system and the setting, you can easily expand on these from there to, say, more complex ideas. I've done that myself. I started off very small, and I've since expanded into more complex storylines of betrayal and alliances and political intrigue. The Accursed are people who are affected by powerful familial curses that grant them supernatural abilities as well as cursed downsides. It is broken down into 5 main lineages. You have the dead, who are ghosts. You have the hungry, who are undead vampiric beings. You have the outcasts, who are otherworldly beings pretending to be human. Primal, who are shapeshifters, and it's not just limited to animal shapeshifters. You also have people like the Hides, who are humanoid shapeshifters into like monstrous humans. You have sorcerers, who are your typical spellcasters. The dead were people who were cursed to become ghosts when they died and be forced to possess their body. Now, over time, you can switch your body for another body or even inanimate objects, such as this action figure, I guess, or life-size action figure, I don't even know. As a dead, you get access to a ghost form, which allows you to go around and affect things in different ways. You can reach across the veil, however, to like affect the world while in your ghost form, such as like throwing objects with telekinesis. Additionally, you have emotional urges. You want to experience the emotions of the living. You gain Curse Dice, which is a resource through meaningful actions that either have you or someone else express that emotion that is related to your lineage or family. Hungry are undead parasites that feed on blood just like vampires, but they also have other thirsts as well. Some of them drink souls, some of them drink memory, emotions, they feed on flesh or hearts, and some of them even bathe in blood instead of just drinking it. I would say they are more akin to the vampire courts of the Dresden Files, where you have not only the vampires, but also the succubus, who also count as vampires. They are nocturnal, so they gain bonuses when they act during the night, but they also suffer some complications when they are acting during the day. They have an ability called Undead Strength, which allows them to regen health, and as well as gain bonuses to certain attributes or arenas, such as social, mental, and physical roles, in exchange for more vulnerabilities, such as being weak to holy objects or exposure to fire or even running water. The outcasts are typically exiled outsiders, beings that are from the outside. There are some outcasts who used to be mortals, but they tried to gain godhood and were struck down for it. They usually have a true form, which is hidden inside a mortal shell. It gives them a few different abilities as well as mobility options, which allow them to behave different from how reality should work. They can traverse liminalities. They have special abilities that allow them to open them if they are locked. They also resurrect when they are killed by beings who originate from the outside, which means they can't kill themselves and they can't be killed by other outsiders, but they can be killed by mortals and other accursed. Their damnation forces them to make relationships, deals, and pacts with humanity in order to gain curse dice. Now, the primal are your shapeshifters. They have their wild form, which allows them to transform into a monstrous form. This differs between different families. You have your werewolves, werecats, were-spiders, were-aquatic creatures, and were-dinosaurs, like reptilian, feathered reptile-like transformations. And then, of course, there's the hides, which are my favorite, who are your Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type shapeshifters. There are more coming down the pipeline. You have the player's guide with a few more, but I'm not going to cover them at the moment just because I'm not as familiar with them. They have their negative effect for being in wild form is protean challenges, which is they essentially have an inner creature that they're trying to emulate with their shapeshifting that tries to dictate their actions. In the case of a werewolf, you have a wolf who wants to try and hunt. This can go into your damnation, which is you gain curse dice by either injuring or causing a status effect appropriate to your family onto a target. Additionally, they have something called Primal Sense, which is their bestial intuition, which they can use like once per scene, which is pretty fun. Sorcerers are mortal spellcasters who took on a more powerful curse so that they could get more powerful magic. They must sacrifice stuff in order to gain curse dice, which they use to fuel their magic. They can also fast cast, which is basically casting magic recklessly without satisfying the curse die requirement. And this can cause some backlash and some different effects that would negatively affect either the caster or people around them. Additionally, they have an ability called Spell Mimicry, which allows them to copy other sorcerer spells that they don't already know as a fast cast, and this can extend to shared lineage spells as well. This is just a brief overview of the lineages. If you want me to go over the various families in more detail, there might be a video on that more specifically. I already did a video with my wife, which I'll post up somewhere up here, where we went over the families and how they might be representative of the different areas around Boston. So I mentioned before the outside. The outside is sort of a catch-all term for any realm that's not Earth or the material plane of existence. Residents from there are called outsiders, and those who were exiled outsiders are known as outcasts. Now, listen, there's not much to say about the Fae. I think they might be discussed in a future book, but right now there's nothing much about them, and I think someone is trying to get me to... Now, the outside can look like many different things. It can be heaven, hell, the underworld, or the Feywilds, or whatever have you. Really, there's so many descriptions I could go down around them that we could be here all day. Additionally, we have liminalities, when the outside and the mortal plane sort of intersect, and you have these weird supernatural locations or haunted locations. There's a variety of different terms in regards to them, such as locked and open, which is basically how restrictive it is for people to gain access to them. Then you have interstitial zones, which are sort of these places that have no emotional connection with anyone, but have grown a sort of like sentience that wants people to connect with them in the location. So they'll do stuff like create Groundhog Day type time loops, or sort of perfected versions of reality to try and keep people who get drawn into it from leaving. So you want them to stay, essentially. But then you have shattered spaces, which are more malevolent. When they draw their victim in, they want to feed off of that victim and will torture them, or have various creatures that are draining the life force of the person or victim. Then you have the battlegrounds, which are sort of hostile liminalities, where the outside bleeds more into the mortal world. And this is where you have outsiders and outcasts often fighting each other. I would say that a good example of a battleground might be something like the digital world in Digimon, where you can see like pieces of infrastructure from the real world bleeding into our reality, into their reality, as it were. So you have like bathrooms or telephone booths, like sort of like just sitting there, like melded into the walls and things. That's my go-to explanation of battlegrounds. There are probably better ones out there already now. Epochs, I already went over, are sort of your splintered timeline or versions of eras that never existed. So like there might be the 1920s. You can go to an epoch that is literally in the 1920s. And lastly, we have loopholes, which are liminalities that cancel out curses. They're highly sought after by Accursed, mainly because they allow them to sort of like quiet the curses that may be afflicting them. Character creation is pretty simple. You first come up with your character concept, then you select your 3 paths: your lineage, your family, and your role path. Depending on your family path, you'll be locked into a specific lineage. There are about 5 lineages, and each of the lineages has between 6 and 7 family paths in the core rules. When you pick your paths, you will gain attributes and skill dots, as well as if you choose major ones, it can give you more attribute and skills than your minor ones, as well as your inheritance and some motifs. Inheritance is a effectively your major path power that you gain access to. Motifs are sort of minor powers that will affect some of your spellcasting and some other aspects of your character. There are a bunch of them, I think 3 per family, so I can't really go over all of them. And then you have your torments, which are sort of your negative roleplay qualities that you'll use to sort of invoke in order to gain more resources, such as momentum and curse dice. After that, you will gain more skill dots, where you can put them anywhere you want. That's not a path skill. Additionally, you gain contacts, who are people that can assist you if you don't have the necessary skill to make a roll. I really like what they did with contacts in this, because each contact has a dice pool of 8 with an enhancement equal to your rating in that specific contact. So it's very nice. If you use it too much, though, they may ask for favors or may cut you off completely. Injuries are across the board the same for everyone. These are sort of your health pool. And then you have your defense and integrity, which is 1 plus a dice roll of either your stamina for defense or resolve or composure for integrity. And then you have your entanglement, which typically is going to start out 1. Once you get it higher, I think it's about 3. You gain access to more spells that were limited before. You do get 5 dots worth of edges, which if you're coming from Dungeons and Dragons would be something like a feat. If you're coming from like Chronicles or World of Darkness, that would be more like a merit. You will choose 3 spells. These are like sort of active abilities that you would throw around. I'll go into spells in a little bit more detail shortly. And then you assign bonds to other player characters. You get 2 dots that you can apply to one person, and then you apply 1 to everyone else. Bonds can be used as an enhancement for teamwork actions. For me personally, you can have a negative or a positive bond, and for me personally, if you have a negative bond with someone, you can use that enhancement on attacks against them or stuff that's meant to be more antagonistic. Additionally, you will choose 3 aspirations, which are your character goals. You'll have 2 short-term and 1 long-term, and I think you can even have a like group aspiration together, and completing those will get you XP that you can then spend on other things like spells, ability attribute increases, skill increases, and things of that nature. A quick overview of spells. You typically have 2 types of spells. You have your passive spells, which require you to have a certain number of curse die on your character. You don't spend them at all, you just have to hold on to them, and while you have them held on, they will have that you can have a spell activated as sort of like a passive effect, such as like invisibility or something to that effect. When you bleed curse dice, this is you spending curse die to activate an effect. This is sort of like throwing a fireball or something of that nature. There are different qualities associated with the spells. I'm not going to go into detail about them. Just know that they exist, as well as if you want to increase the effectiveness of a spell or give it a different effect, there are things called advances, which are additional spell effects that you can unlock with XP. They are limited to different entanglement levels, so you'll see something that says entanglement 1, which means you can get it at entanglement 1, but if something says entanglement 3, you have to wait till you're entanglement 3 to purchase it. Additionally, there are more complex magics called rituals, which I don't think are often used in combat, but typically you'd want to have multiple accursed casting a ritual because it has a entanglement limit on it for like how much entanglement is needed to cast that ritual, which can get very high, and so you'd need like 3 or 4 people to cast the more powerful rituals. Here's some example spells just to help clarify how the rules work. First, you have Force of Nature, where you need to bleed a curse die to activate. So if you have 3 curse die, that goes down to 2. And it gives you a +1 enhancement on your unarmed attacks, as well as double 9s, which means 10s usually count as double the amount of successes or hits. Now 9s count as well, so you get a little bit of a bonus there. Additionally, they count as a spell with the elemental attunement of your choice for the purposes of bypassing armor, so you could do fire or lightning. And then we have Refined Fury, which is a Entanglement 1 advance, which means you can pick it up when you're at Entanglement 1, and you can get additional weapon tags on it that apply to your unarmed attacks. So you could give it something like Piercing, which means you bypass armor regardless. Or you could have something like, I don't know, Heavy, which I think gives you advantage on your attacks, which is like a big boost that I won't go into too much detail on. Universal Keyhole has a cost of holding 2 curse dice, so if you have 3 curse die in your dice pool, when you activate this ability, you still have 3 curse die in your pool. It's just once you get down to only having 1 curse die in your pool that you have, the ability switches off. When you activate this spell, you can move through a slim space within a wall, closed door, or other barrier that takes no more than a step to cross. This could be a crack, a crevice, or something as tiny as a drill hole. The guide will inform you if a barrier is too thick for you to cross with this spell. Now, this is typically like, oh, you want to break and enter into into like some sort of building, just have a little pinhole or crack in a window, and you can go right through it. Whereas if you want to get into like a bank vault or something, like that's sealed up pretty tightly. You need to have like a thermite drill or something so that you can even like get close to the inside of that vault. Anyway, I hope this sort of clarifies what spells are like. Oh, and additionally, you can see here that Universal Keyhold is shared with the Primal, which basically just means that if you're a shapeshifter primal, you can also take this spell as well as the dead who take it normally. If you're looking for non-paid Curseborne games to check it out, I highly recommend going to the Onyx Path Discord or the fan Curseborne Discord in order to look for groups. If you're interested in trying out Curseborne just to see what it's like, I have a Startplaying Games account where I run paid Curseborne games, and you can check them out. I like to do introductory games for new players all the time, and so hopefully there's one running this week or next week that you can check out. How I've run Curseborne is usually I'll pick a city I'm familiar with, in most cases Boston, and then I'll come up with a general idea or concept for the overarching plot I want to explore. Recently, I did Execute.exe as a storyline for my Startplaying group. That group, we're investigating basically technological occult phenomenon, such as like haunted video games and various different other kind of phenomenon. Additionally, with my Accursed in Boston series, I wanted to focus on the interconnection of the different families. So we had the players investigate a liminality that was someone else's family's liminality, which caused a lot of conflict between the two family groups. And then we had the Family Feud episode I did where I wanted to explore the various dynamics of the different families interacting with each other. And that way I had the players set up a party and try to establish different relationships with the various accursed families. I definitely think you should utilize your players' contacts as NPCs for the campaign. Contacts don't just have to be something that's sitting to the wayside until a player needs it. Maybe they have a person of interest who's a expert in archaeology. Well, that expert in archaeology might have missions for them that are related to finding magical artifacts and things of that nature. So that's kind of like why I like to lean into those contacts, because they're basically the players just giving you plot hooks at that point. They're like, oh yeah, this is a person I worked with in the past who was a fence or an informant for the police, and now they're an informant for me, and things of that nature. Also, if you have it as a player's contact, when you have a request for some sort of mission or something, the players are more likely to pick it up because they'll get more in favor with that contact. Stuff like that. Definitely for combat, I've been trying to get combat as dialed in as possible. Sometimes it'll be too difficult, sometimes it'll be too easy. I want to hit a sweet spot of challenge, more or less, on most encounters, though sometimes I will lean into the more difficult encounter if it makes sense, especially if my players get in over their head. If you want to try and adjust combat, I highly recommend either spreading out damage amongst the players as a way of making combat easier. That way, you have the enemies spreading injuries across multiple people, and the way that Storypath Ultra works, the more injuries you take, the powerful a player character gets, because they're getting like an adrenaline boost. But if you really want to dial up the combat, focus fire is always a good rule of thumb. For instance, one of my players in my Curseborne actual play wanted me to kill off their character. So I basically just said, okay, these people are going to focus fire on the vampire character. And I got her down to 1 injury at one point, but she managed to escape, which happens in any case. Those are my basic key pieces of advice for running Curseborne games. If you have any questions, please leave them down below in the comments, and I'll try and get to them in a future video, hopefully. There are a boatload of actual plays for Curseborne that I highly recommend. Number 1, I'm going to recommend my own Curseborne game called Accursed in Boston. I've been running that for about a year now. Hopefully in 2026, I'll have a second season, depending on how schedules go. And then, of course, Matthew Dawkins, the Gentleman Gamer, has been running Curseborne as well, with a variety of influencers and famous people who have tried to check it out. And of course, Onyx Path's Twitch channels have their own Curseborne actual plays done by a variety of different people, because it's such a highly sought after game. As someone who runs games on their Twitch as well, we're always like, a bunch of us are always like, oh, can we please run a Curseborne game right now, because we're really excited about it and having a lot of fun with it. And it's such a delight. I really hope someone runs it in a time zone that I can run it. I can be a player in it, because I'm really excited to be a player in the Curseborne games. Thank you so much for getting this far into the video. Like and subscribe. It really helps us out, get more people to see these videos, and help get more interest into Curseborne. Curseborne really became something I wanted to see before I even knew it was announced, because I was someone who posted on the Onyx Path forums, like, wouldn't it be interesting to see an urban fantasy Storypath game, because Chronicles of Darkness had stopped getting greenlit for new products. So I was like, hey, Onyx Path has all these horror game designers. It seems like such a waste to not have their own urban fantasy or horror game line that they could just lean into and do what they're good at. And then I find out, oh, they'd been working on this for a couple of years or a few years already, and it was all in secret. And then we got the Curseborne teaser videos, and Danielle playing a generic urban fantasy game with Storypath Ultra, which was clearly a backdoor pilot in a way, to get people interested in Curseborne. I'm just really excited to see that this project has come out. I've been a major advocate for it, even though I'm not a developer on it. I'd like to see more people play it, because I always like having more players to play with and more game masters to have discussions with around this game. I am very passionate about it, and I think my coworkers, when they recommended me play Chronicles of Darkness and Demon the Descent, had no idea what sort of Pandora's box they were going to open when they introduced me to these games, and I got interested into stuff like Trinity Continuum and Scion, and just D10 dice pool games in general, which is such a weird thing to think of, that, like, as a genre, I really like using these dice more so than a D20. Anyway, thank you for sticking around past my rambling, and I hope you have a good one.